All right, welcome to the book discussion on doing Imago relationship therapy and the space between. We have already been covering the first four chapters, which includes the introduction and the preface. And we encourage you to look on YouTube or the Facebook group with the same name, Doing Imago, to find previous recordings and catch up to us, or just jump in. That's fine too. And today I've invited Sophie Slade to join us because we are in chapter 4 covering the developmental stages. And so Sophie's going to talk just a little bit about the differences, the changes from sort of the older model to this, which aren't very big, and then how she thinks about it, what she's curious about. And of course, we want to hear from all of you about what you're curious about the developmental stages, how they inform your work and understanding yourself. And if we get to chapter 5, that's great. And if we don't, then we will just continue on our next book discussion with chapter 5. But I think what's interesting about chapter 4 and 5 is chapter 4 is the human agenda and chapter 5 is the human problem. So they're a really nice bookend to each other. And I think if we don't get through 5 today, which I doubt we would, we can talk about how they complement each other, these two chapters. So, Sophie, I want to introduce you for, I'm sure most people here know you, but for those who don't, who are listening to this recording, Sophie is a senior faculty member and, somebody that I really look up to and has been not only practicing and training in Imago for many years, we won't say how many, but also is one of our most creative and prolifically creative creators of advanced programs. And she coming up here will be doing one of her creations, which is, well, I'll let you tell them a little bit, but it's a cruise where she'll be doing a couples workshop focused on sex. So, Sophie, can you please fill in some of those blanks for me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. David and I developed David's my husband. He and I developed a workshop called well, we called it originally Satisfying Sex for Committed Couples. And we've written a book, which I'm currently, well, trying to get published if I ever find the time to get onto that. So it elaborates on all of that. But it's just a fun workshop to enhance couples' sexual relationship because it can get a bit tedious after a while, when you've been with the same partner for 40, 50, 60 years. So it's a bit same old sometimes. So this is about ways of kind of making it more fun and as a way of connecting more deeply and connecting with yourself and your partner, knowing yourself more fully. So we're having a lot of fun. So we're heading off on this cruise that Shlomo has organized for us, and we're pretty excited about that and a bit daunted.
Yes, and all of this information is on our Facebook group. So if you want to find out more about the cruise and the workshop, you can find it there. And
I think there are still some cabins available. So
wonderful. And also, I want to plug that Coco on her podcast, it's called the Relationship Blueprint, interviewed Sophie. And it's the very first podcast, and I believe it's reposted on Facebook. But if it's not, remind me because it is such a great listen. I just listened to it, and I have to tell you, I got a little inspired. Steven's like, what's going on?
good.
Sort of like when he shows up with flowers, I'm like, okay, what happened? Well, okay, so let's do a round of just introductions. If you wouldn't mind sharing your name and where you're from, and one thing that you are interested in terms of where we are in the book, if you wouldn't mind. Can I pick on you to start, Bonnie?
You bet you can, Michelle. My name is Bonnie Brinkman. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I Imago is the gift that just keeps on giving. So what I'm interested in is the combination at this age, being partially retired, of applying things to me and my relationship, and also deepening what I can do with couples. A lot of this is for me. A lot of this is for me.
Mm.
Thank you, Bonnie. Who wants to jump in next? Can I go in order of arrival and pick on you next, Michael?
Sure thing. My name's Michael Kaufman. I live in the Monterey Bay area, and I'm interested. Well, the question I asked, I think, in the last session is how much, as a therapist, I'm not a therapist, I'm an interested party, in quotes. I I'm interested in how much you use developmental stages and think about them in your work. And like Bonnie, I'm also interested in applying this to myself and my relationships.
Okay, great. Catherine?
Yeah, hi, I'm Catherine, and I'm joining from a small town in Ontario, Canada. And I actually, chapter 4 has been my favorite so far, just because I've always been so interested in attachment theory, both as a mom and in work I've done. So I like where it's going and the connections I'm making with it. So it's very nice.
Great. Thanks and welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
Leslie?
Hi, my name's Leslie Sullivan, and I am in the State College, Pennsylvania area, the home of Penn State University, in case you don't know where it is. And hi, Bonnie. Haven't seen you in a while.
Hi, Leslie. Hi, everybody. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, and I love attachment theory too. Yeah, I mean, this book is just so deep. I mean, literally, I could read a paragraph and think about it for a month and still not be sure that I completely took it apart. So I love this. I love this because I get to hear all of you and all your thinking and relating. And that, I just like to keep learning, and I just love that. So it kind of keeps me alive and joyful. That's all.
Yes. Thank you, Leslie. Yes, I was thinking maybe we have to read it again after we're all done.
I know we should do it again because I think it'll
Again.
go deeper and deeper, right? Honestly,
Yes, yes.
I,
Kind of like your
I don't know
favorite
how I feel.
movie.
I
You
would
go, you
invite,
watch it, and you go, wow, I don't remember this the first
yeah,
time. This is cool.
yeah. I would invite you to do that, Michelle. Just rerun the group.
Okay, I'll do it. I think we need a different time zone because Australia is feeling left out.
Okay. Okay.
Latricia, am I saying your name correctly? I want to make sure I get it.
You
Okay.
are. Latricia Williams, I'm from Dearborn, Michigan. And for me, I like connecting theory into Imago. And I know some of us were on the live yesterday, and I just love how we're able to restore connection. That's what it's all about. Like finding ways to take this theory with what we've learned and then create that deeper level of connectedness. And that's what I'm excited about.
Yes, yes. And Latricia is mentioning the summit. And if we have a recording, we'll definitely post it on Facebook for everyone to partake in because it really was so connecting to people using dialogue in multiple countries and situations, and it was very inspiring.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Hi, Amy. Good to see you.
Hi, everybody. I know some of you, but not all of you. My name's Amy Clay. Um I live in Northern Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C. And I am just joining this group for the first time. I own this book. This is a big book. And I'm excited to read it. And I'm here because you guys are going to help me.
Yes, we are.
I was kind of like, wow, it is dense. And so I appreciate already hearing that we could read it paragraph by paragraph and take some time with it, but I'm excited to be here. I was trained in Imago about 20 years ago, and I'm kind of re-immersing myself back into the work and excited to be doing that. And so this is part of my efforts to do so is sinking my teeth back into this book. So that's it for me for now.
Great. Welcome, Amy. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean my book is so full of underlining and I think the highlighter's next.
I bet. And those little flags,
Yes, yes. Become like a Bible for me. I mean, it's just so yeah, it just the meaning keeps unfolding as I'm reading it over and over again. So we're gonna help you, Amy. It's a team sport. I like to say Imago is a team sport. If you're doing it alone, you're in trouble.
right?
Yeah.
The whole point, we're all in connection, trying to
Yes.
figure it out. And some people had mentioned their own personal lives, and I'm also working towards my ASEX certification, and I'm kind of joking with myself, hopefully to manifest a change in this, but I'm a relationship therapist and emerging sex therapist that's kind of out of both of those. So I'm single, and so I'm interested in and hope to be doing some more of the keeping the love you find work. I'm kind of interested in kind
Yeah.
of into that. And I think there's a lot of people that could benefit from that type of work. So, and then I want to say one other thing that I want to say at this group, just to kind of put it out in the world. So I'm divorced from a Northern Irishman, and my daughter has been going to Northern Ireland a lot. And so she's really like wanting to understand, Northern Ireland and the Catholic and the Protestants and these people and all this stuff. And I was like, and so I don't know if you guys have watched, but there's a new movie, I think it's a movie or a series called, oh no, it's a movie. It's called Say Nothing. If you haven't watched it, please do.
Mm.
But it kind of like reignited this part of me about doing work that is a little bit more community based and um not that I'm going to ship off to Northern Ireland and get myself right into that, but it just like was so confronting that there's these folks that are just in conflict still, and they just cannot
Hmm.
see others' perspective. And it's just watching that movie and trying to explain it to a 14-year-old, just kind of it brings this stuff right to the surface of like how come human beings just can't hear each other and the space between. So
Mm.
that's just a little
No, but
random thing.
no, it's not random though. It's so relevant. I love that you brought that in. So, Bonnie,
Yeah.
will you say hello and tell us where you are and anything you want to share about the book so far?
Well, I wanted to join this group for a long time, but I've been exceptionally busy in transition. Um, we bought a house in Dominican Republic and we just returned, and so now we're in two places and just returned to a big flood in our house.
Mm.
Yeah, we have to remove the floors and so anyway, I'm not
In
I'm
New
not
York or in the
oh,
Dominican
in New
Republic?
York. Yeah, the house
Yeah,
that we rent out. So, but yeah. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to connect. I love the book. I love the depth. I love the quantum concepts, and I love to just integrate so many things that I read in that book in terms of psychology, spirituality, and yeah, I mean it's so great to just connect to everybody. Yeah.
it's so great to see you and hear your
Good to see
voice.
you all, and
Yeah.
I love just the concept of sharing and dialogue and just having an opportunity to connect. And
Hmm.
I'm I'm not fully here yet, but I'm starting to feel a little more
That
grounded. I had
sounds
to do a
good.
lot of business, and that's why I was a little bit late, but
Well, I'm glad you're
it's
here.
so
And
great to be here.
and
Yeah.
Anne, you want to say hi? I see you're eating and
Yeah. Hey, I will probably turn my camera off to eat. And I may only stay a few minutes because I am in the thick of my
you
dissertation
are just a
and
few weeks left.
really exhausted. But I just wanted to show up and see everyone's lovely faces and pick up some energy from here, maybe. Um, yeah. And I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina.
All right. Great. Thank you. Well, so let's dive in and if people show up, I'll just let them in. But I wanted to point out on page 86, and I guess it goes for a few pages on to 91. I just really appreciate that before we got into the stages, Harville and Helen outline these core needs that are just really critical because this idea of safety, expression of full aliveness, connecting, structure, and support. Um, I just think they make a beautiful frame for me to think about my own needs and also the environments that we're creating for people to come into, and making sure that those environments have those elements. I think this is a really nice frame for any session, whether you're going to be hosting the Northern Irish Catholics and Protestants, or a couple that you want to create that safety, but also a chance for them to express full aliveness, to connect to each other, to hold a structure for them, and for them to think about the kind of support they need to grow or heal. So I just think it's a great setup for now these developmental stages.
Can I just add something to that? I mean, I'll kind
Please.
of elaborate a bit. What I'm hearing is that really we're reading this book and trying to apply it on a personal level in our own relationships, and how we show up with our clients, which is probably not the same as we show up in our personal relationships. Our developmental stuff that comes in up and our needs that show up and so on. And how we facilitate our clients, how we guide them through a session, how we help them kind of go beyond their adaptive styles and heal from their childhood stuff. And then I'm hearing also on the community level that this is applicable really, it kind of gives us a framework as a way of thinking on the community level as well. What are the developmental challenges that particular communities? Does it have to do with basic levels of attachment connecting, or is it exploration? Is it, where are they at? And so I think I love this material. I mean, I just love it, love it, love it. I love to understand stuff. I'm very head focused. So it gives me a way of kind of really getting in there and trying at least to come up with some hypotheses that are meaningful. So I love the multiple levels on which we can look at this work.
Yes. So Sophie, will you go into on page 92, the developmental journey, kind of what you see is shifted slightly?
Well, a couple of shifts, nothing huge, but the biggest shift I think is in Harville and Helen no longer call the first developmental stage the attachment stage. They now call it connecting, the connecting stage. And as I don't know how you've kind of understood that shift, but what I got from it, from reading that chapter, was that they see kind of attachment needs as a response to not getting kind of enough of the experiences of connecting. So the desire, the drive to attach comes out of sort of ruptures in connecting, as opposed to it being the attaching stage or attachment stage where we have to connect. We're already connected, is what I'm hearing them say.
Mm-hmm.
Say. So that's one. I don't know if that's what other people got from it. Is that your understanding? Did you get something else? Is that making sense?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, as somebody who is really wounded at this stage, I'm adopted, which you may attribute to that. It may be that I was adopted by people on the spectrum, but because of my wounding, when I read about it and I hear trust, mistrust, for me, it brings up shame. like, oh, I don't trust people and I should trust people and I'm broken because I'm not trusting people. So for me, the sustained connecting had a little more shared responsibility, that my parents had trouble sustaining connecting and that I have trouble sustaining connecting felt better to me as a
Mm,
frame. Um, than kind of a woundedness that I pick up on sometimes with the attachment language.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's one of the wonderful, wonderful things about this material for me is it helps me to stay out of judgment. Judgment of myself, judgment of my clients, helping them move beyond judgment of each other, because I think it does give us a different story that is not about people being bad or being wrong or being, misbehaving, being abusive even. It gives us a story that helps us to get to compassionate understanding and moving beyond rather than being stuck in. I mean, the point of understanding all this is not to say, oh, well, poor me, I'm so wounded, you shouldn't treat me that way. It's to go beyond being compulsively addicted to our adaptive strategies, I think. So,
Yeah, and one thing about attachment theory overall is I think we're really just talking about adaptations in Imago language. Those are categories or ways of describing different adaptations, but we know there's so many different adaptations. And we also
mhm.
know that we use different ones in different relationships. So,
Which I think kind of feeds into the second shift that I'm seeing here, that Harville and Helen have moved from kind of categorization to adaptive strategies. So it's now clinging, not this person is a clinger. But at times, they respond by clinging or by detaching. And I think it encapsulates for me much more of that flavor of, we're all in all of these at different times, in different situations, in different, if we have clients who kind of keep threatening to leave, we may go into one of our, you know, clinging or detaching styles, but it doesn't make us a clinger or a detacher in that kind of ossified kind of way. I mean, what I didn't like about those labels was they were seen as character structures, whereas I think they're more adaptive relational strategies. And I think that little shift from to ing really captures that in a way that's very beautiful.
yes, and we will get into this more next time. It's on page 116 to like 118, where they go through the different stages and the different adaptations based on those stages. So, um, that's where they start to use terms like clinger, clinging, things like that as well. So that's why I think it's a good pairing. Um, yeah. So yeah, the adaptations are flexible. We typically are not going to use the same adaptation in every situation. But of course, in our relationships, they get polarized. So
So my curiosity is how do these five basic needs that Havel and Helen say we show up with in childhood and throughout life, how do they impact us in our own relationships, in the ways we show up with our clients and set the frame, in our facilitation of them? And so how do we help them to meet each other's needs? And then on a community level, how might we work with that? I think those are the questions that come up for me. How can this impact me in terms of the work I'm doing?
I have a comment on that. I think in couples, it's like if you don't get some of those needs met in childhood, then you don't ask for them because it sort of feels futile, like, well, I'm not going to get what I need anyway. And so
Mhm.
teaching the vulnerability of being able to identify your need and then ask for that need to be met by your partner takes a tremendous amount of courage because it just you lay yourself out there for rejection or not getting the need met. In fact, I asked my husband last night something like, well, what would you need your mom to say in that situation? What would you yearn for her, want her to say? And he just went blank. He said, I can't even tell you because I've learned my whole life not to ask for what I need. So I think sometimes we underestimate in couples how hard it is not only to ask for the need to be met, but to even identify it. So I think psychoeducation about these universal needs is an important piece to set the
Mhm.
groundwork to explore.
I agree with you, Anne, and one of the things that you said that stood out for me is the 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 real like the ignorance that I can ask once I define what it is I want, uh, so that there has to be a lot of education prior to that of explaining, the stages and all that sort of thing. And I also think that when I tell my partner, this is what I might need from you right now, we've got to remember that that's the toughest thing they have to do. I mean, it goes against because it blocks their adaptive way of doing things. So it just seems like so much psychoeducation or regular education of, I mean, you sound like you have a metrosexual husband, which is so rare and wonderful to have the guys, and I know this might sound sexist on film here, but so often, the guys have not had a chance to even try on a lot of this.
Well, to be fair, he goes along with Imago quite well, but when I asked that question, he sort of was like, oh, that's such a therapist question.
Uh,
Not
these
always
poor
in the mood.
partners.
No, they put up with a lot from us. Sometimes they're
Yes.
not in the mood.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, here's Valerie. Good.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking also how inappropriately I have asked for what I wanted at times. How often I've used sort of blaming David or other people for not giving it to me rather than, just saying, I'd like this. Would you be willing to give it to me? It's been a long journey to get to just that phrase of I would like, would you be willing? And then it being okay for somebody to say, no, I wouldn't be willing. When I've gone to all this effort of finally identifying what I need and asking for it, well, there's no room for you to not give it to me then, especially if I've asked nicely and the way I'm supposed to. But yeah.
Anyone relate to just me? That's okay, good. This is a support group now for finding your unmet needs is just the first step.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
then there's saying what you want, and then there's accepting when you can't have it yet, maybe.
I,
Yes, Bonnie.
I think people can adapt with unwanted needs two ways. One, not asking, fear of asking, indirectly asking, or demanding.
Mm-hmm.
So demanding is also the fear of not getting. So the fear of
Yes.
not getting someone or ask in an indirect way or someone may demand or act out, which is also not really asking, because it's an acting out as opposed to
Yes.
conscious, mindful asking. So it's really our task as therapists to help them identify what it is they're really asking for.
Exactly.
And maybe who they're really asking, because if they're projecting, then they might be not realizing that they're really asking a parental figure, and in terms of what they're bringing into the relationship from their earliest relationships. So
Yeah. So Bonnie, what I heard was that there's on one end, there's maybe even not knowing our needs or diffuse or indirect. And then on the other end, there's a demanding, and that they're both rooted in this fearfulness that, like, somehow it might not be okay, or I might not get my needs met. And so we can help people think about where they are on that spectrum. And then what was the last point that you made? That seemed really important too. Maybe someone else will remember. Um,
I was basically talking about two opposing ways of expressing the fear, which could be retreating or being timid or indirectly asking for something that might be easier that they think maybe they could get, or the acting out part where
yes.
they're not really present, and they're enacting something from the past with a
Oh, I
parental
know.
figure
Thank
project.
you. I'm remembering now. Yeah, so you talked about like the minimizing, maximizing strategies around needs, but
Yeah,
then also you're talking about who are we asking? Are
yeah,
we asking the partner, or on some unconscious level, are we asking somebody from our past and becoming more conscious about who are we asking, and also maybe what part of me is asking? Is it the adult me, or is it a more immature part of me?
right.
Yeah,
Yes, there's a
yeah.
lot to explore there.
Yeah, these are great points though.
Yeah.
Would anyone want to add to what Bonnie's saying? Hi, Valerie, by the way, welcome, welcome. I love the pink.
You know, I'm doing a book club with women who love too much. And
Oh,
it gives, if you have any single people, please tell them to buy it. The book is just amazing. And it gives you different scenarios of life. And it talks about, I think it's the second chapter, where growing up in an abusive parent in an abusive home where parents were not always available. So what ends up happening when I get in relationship, because they were so in their own dysfunction that I just quietly never ask for anything, is what we see. So it goes back to us knowing what our needs are, and sometimes how we're raised with our parents and not getting things. It just, the needs is going back to those development stages in the very, very, very beginning, how not knowing because of what's going on around us causes us to develop in a different way and not speak up and not be heard. Goes back to the needs and knowing. And you'll be surprised at how many, single women don't know what that is. When you say, what do you need? They don't know. They don't know what they need. They just go out, and if it feels good and you tell me I look nice, then they say, oh, thank you. But what do I need? How do you complete me? And that's what dating should really look like for people. You should know what you need before you get in a relationship with someone. The self-work.
yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And so you're saying basically that these forces that shape our needs, shape us, are invisible or really hard to figure out. But by figuring them out, then the dating process becomes better, healthier for us, because we come in not just responding to what we're receiving, but really clear about what we want. Am I with you?
Healthier connections, because I go in knowing what I need, opposed to just, you saw me, you like me, I like you, but does that meet my needs? And sometimes I didn't know that if I came from dysfunction. I had two parents who were threatening divorce and then coming to me and telling me their problems. I just go in the corner and be quiet I don't want to choose. And so a lot of times that's what our relationships look like. We never felt heard in that original dynamic. And so
Yeah.
as adults, we're still quiet and we're still not speaking up and we just show up, not knowing
Yes.
what we need.
Yeah, I think it harks back to what Michelle was saying about the shame of having the need in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fear of not getting it met that you're talking about, or the fear of not getting the need met, but I think also the fear of getting the needs met. Because if I get my needs met, then I'm vulnerable in oh so many ways. And it
Yes.
touches into my shame about having that need in the first place. So it's very complex, isn't it?
Yes. Makes me think of Pat Love. She would talk about reunion grief, that when we get
Yeah.
what we've been longing for, we have to grieve all the times we didn't receive that. And that's very uncomfortable, dysregulating. The grief is can be hard. But I'm also thinking about our unconscious the pattern. So if we're used to going in the corner and being invisible so as to not lose love, right? Then how that impacts who's attracted to us, what we co-create with other people, the dynamics we recreate. It's very rich as we start to unpack it with the two people in the relationship. Because I think, I married someone who's used to just being quiet and being really compliant and get along. And, you know, all of a sudden he needs more. And I'm like, but you've been so easy. What, what's this about? Leslie, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just you know, just the memory of like working with kids, like kids who have been traumatized when I worked in community mental health for many years. One of the things that I noticed was often, the child would be taken out of that environment, put into a better, healthier environment. But when they got there, all they wanted to do was go home. Part of that, of course, is they just want to be with their parents. But part of that also is that they don't know what to do in a healthy environment. It's like they're crawling out of their skin.
Yeah.
And so part of that, to Sophie's point, is probably a lot of fear. Like, I don't know what to expect next. I,
Yeah.
and then realizing that a lot of the behaviors they're bringing aren't really appropriate here. It's like, I think of like, being uh, an adult child of an alcoholic, or, and how you have these, I guess we call them in Imago, um, um, brilliant adaptations to unhealthy situations you pick up as a kid. But then when you get to be an adult and you bring them into a different, healthier place, they're really not brilliant anymore. So,
Yeah. Well said, Leslie. I remember reading this study, and there was rats, and they had them in a box, and they were shocking them randomly, and then they opened up the box so they could go to other boxes,
hmm
and they would go back to the box with the shocks
yeah.
because on some level, having the bad thing happen, you kind of know you have a reprieve after that, right? You're like, okay, now I can relax because like that just happened and that's what I expect.
Mhm.
But if I go to this other box where there's peace, I never know when it's coming, and I'm actually more anxious over there. And I think that we can unconsciously choose situations because it's what we expect. It's
It's familiar,
our
and
imago, and then we'll provoke it, in order to relax a little bit. Like, okay, yeah, I thought that's what was going to go on. Now I can actually relax a little.
And keep my defenses up because
It,
I know
Yeah.
how.
one of
Michael?
the
Michael,
one of the connections I made earlier in this conversation was to Amy mentioned keeping the love you find earlier. I did the 365-day companion to keeping the love you find. And one of the things that the connection I made was to utilitarian dating, wanting to understand what my unconscious is looking for. And now I've been married now I've been with my wife for almost 20 some years, and I forgot. I mean, I remember and then I forget. What is my unconscious really looking for here? What does my unconscious really want? Why am I attracted to this person? And the other connection I made to what Leslie was talking about was, I just lost it. Oh yeah, rewiring what is normal. What it like, um, I remember like one of the studies on people who win lotteries or get a lot of money all of a sudden, they find a way to get back to what they were familiar with really fast. And so rewiring what is normal, like it's okay to have for somebody to write me a big check. Speaking of money, I mean, I know Michelle, you did the money thing the other day, but rewiring how our brain allows our needs to get met, not just money needs, sexual needs, intimacy needs, etc., connecting needs, etc. Like allowing those things, to Sophie's point, sometimes we fear getting those needs met. So rewiring our brain to allow those needs to be met, that this is normal. Being safe is normal. Being connected is normal versus, the traumatized normal.
So, Michael, are you going to tell us what your unconscious is really looking for, or is it a secret?
Well, I don't know that I don't know that I have it succinctly, but I know that earlier in the conversation we were talking about, well, so one of the things I learned in my family of origin is that needs are expressed very loudly.
Mm.
So whenever I ask for or share what I want, it's typically with energy behind it, loud, and sometimes appears to be angry or so my wife, as the imago match to that, she had, I'm just like her father and her sister, who were very much, so we're constantly interacting as other people, not as ourselves.
Mm.
There's Michelle, for me to answer the question about what my unconscious is really wanting would take probably the rest of our time together.
Okay, well, I'll expect the dissertation next time. Write up. I'll write up. No, I love the question. Like, what is our unconscious really seeking with this job, with this person, with this friendship? Because it's such an important question. It probably has many answers, like you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, multiple layers. Bonnie's wanting to say something there.
Well, I want to hear from you too, Sophie.
Say again?
You were going to talk, and I definitely want to hear more from you. I was going to give an example. Recently, Darcy and I are, my wife and I are, looking at things over our 35 years. And we have now come to understand that when Darcy says there's a beautiful moon upstairs, through the window upstairs, would you like to see it? That lands on me far better than, oh my God, there's a beautiful moon up here. Hurry, come up here. Well, I had a mother who was the helicopter parent. And the big joke in our family was when we passed around Christmas presents, you made sure that you ooh-ahhed enough for my mom, or, she'd have a fit. So what do? I fall in love with somebody who's an ooh-ahher. And She needs big responses, and she wants to join you in them. And of course, my adaptation was to shrink. My adaptation was to almost like push against. So it's been really cool over the years that we realized, hey, there's still moons, there's still sunsets, and there's still all those good things, or a good-looking bird outside. But her gentle entry is getting a lot more for her and helping me to want to find things and connect with her than ever before because we were doing our dance.
Lovely example. Yeah. When I was reading this piece, when I came to those 5 needs that we all show up with from day one and throughout life, essentially, I thought, well, when I'm doing therapy, I mean, there's a level of my personal relationships, but when I'm in the room with my clients, which of these am I having the hardest time bringing into the space? You know, if my clients are showing up with all these needs for safety, for to be able to express full aliveness, experience and sustain connecting and have structure and experience support, I got curious about that. And I think for me as a therapist, not in my life necessary outside of therapy, but I think in my work as a therapist, the one that's most challenging for me is the experience in expressing full aliveness. I mean, I say Margot is a therapy of joy, and I believe that fundamentally, and I don't want therapy to be about problems. You know, I teach that therapy is not about problems. Therapy is about joyful aliveness. And yet I think I probably push that so hard in my trainings because that's probably the most challenging for me to bring into or facilitate in the space. I'm just curious about how other people resonated with those 5 in terms of what you feel is easier for you, what you feel is more challenging for you. And any others you might add.
I think for me it's kind of the function of sensing. Like I know that it took me a long time to do centerings before we started. And even now I tend towards a more abbreviated centering just because for me I have a hard time like sort of settling into my body. So I'm pretty good at like being heady and I'm pretty comfortable with emotions and expressing a lot of emotions and all that, but the sensing piece, which I guess would get into structure, but it's kind of that being energy.
Yeah. I think Imago is wonderful in offering us the possibility of structure
Hmm.
in our work. I mean, it is a very structured approach. But I've also seen a lot of people do Imago kind of with very loose structure around the dialogue. So, um, you know, what's that about and what's behind it? You know, whereas I tend to be very structured in terms of how I guide a session. You know, I do a centering, I have a certain format I follow in the in the centering and so on and so forth. So the structure piece now, and that comes from my childhood with my mother, who was, you know, there was a place for everything and everything in its place, and meals were always at the same time, and Monday was wash day, and Tuesday was laundry, you know, sort of ironing day, and so on and so forth. You know, it's a bit like the fish, egg and chips, it must be Wednesday, you know, the Shirley Valentine. Wasn't quite that bad, but it was pretty close, you know. This was England in the post-war. We were trying to reestablish structure and security and predictability and all of that stuff, hanging on to it for dear life. So the structure, I think I maybe overdo. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah, Bonnie.
I have the opposite with the structure, even though I came from a highly structured family in terms of having to eat at certain times and having to do my homework before the TV. But I seemed I've I was a rebellious teenager, and so I rebelled against authority. I rebelled against structure. And I find that's the challenging part in my imago work with couples. I'm very good being present and with the guided centering in the beginning, and I'm good with having humor and creating safety in order for them to express their full aliveness and connecting. But I find when clients want to move away from the structure because they get into their own dramas that they feel they need to repeat because of what we're talking about, because that's familiar, even though they have an opportunity to be more happy and to connect more. I have a hard time redirecting them back to structure. And part of it is that rebellious nature that I've adapted to as a child. But part of it also is I also have psychoanalytic background, and I try to integrate the two. And in my psychoanalytic background, we learn not to have structure and just trust the unconscious process that the clients are going through. There's a wisdom in the unconscious, and so to follow that first, follow that, and then structure. Bring some structure later so that they could have more autonomy and awareness, like bring their spontaneity more into their conscious mind. So, I
Mhm.
struggle with how much to follow them, how much to guide them with the imago structure, and then I have to constantly look at myself to assess what is really best for them. Am I following them because I think I'm following their unconscious wisdom, or am I kind of rebelling because of my own childhood? So I have to really, there's so much that I need to be aware of at the simultaneously in terms of my own stuff to keep separate, or what's best for them in terms of the spontaneity of our work that is at times necessary, and then, bringing it back to structure.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing is the compliance and the rebellion both in there, and when we've got two parents or when we've got two therapeutic models, who are we complying with? Who are we rebelling against at any particular moment in our therapy work? Are we complying with the psychoanalytic? Are we rebelling against imago or vice versa? And it's just like, having two parents in our
But the good news is that my clients will confront me. So I when I talk to them, they say, well, maybe we need to go back to, you know, remember that work that we did when we were mirroring each other. And I'm
absolutely.
finding the need for validation. I said,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that would be so that, yeah,
Yeah,
I
they're
find,
letting you know their need for structure.
yeah,
Yeah, bringing it in
it's
at
fantastic.
times.
But I
Yeah,
tell them, we work as partners, and I'm really happy for your feedback because
yeah. Thank goodness for the feedback we get from our clients. Not always given um, in terms we would like to hear
right,
it,
right.
perhaps, but
Sometimes indirectly, and
yeah, they do let us know their needs sometimes, directly or indirectly. Yeah, Valerie.
Hi, uh, sorry that I was late. Um, I wasn't able to join on time, but those comments that you just made, Bonnie Hirschhorn, were very helpful to me because I started out. I just got into Imago about 10 or 12 years ago, and I jumped in with both feet. And before that, for about 50 years, I was a psychoanalytic practitioner. And so I bought I bought in. So I decided to really try to use this model. I believed in it. Partly I was attracted to it because being older, I didn't want to have a bunch of psychoanalytic cases and, stroke out on them, 5 years in or something. And the Imago work seems tighter. It seems like you can really help a couple in several years and not necessarily an indefinite open period of time like you have to do with psychoanalytic work. But then, so I'm fine with the structure. But what you're really helping me see is that I grew up with kind of an erratic, sometimes arbitrary, sometimes laissez-faire kind of thing too, or not too, but different from yours, and that helps me see that I need a rational structure. I need a structure that makes sense to me. I need a structure that's predictable. I don't need an autocratic kind of structure, and that's not usually what I provide. But my problem, going back to what you said, Sophie, is that I learned all this stuff about bringing in, like, for example, in my training, bringing in kazoos. And for 10 years, I've been thinking, now, where am I going to get these kazoos? I really ought to bring in stuff just so people can just be lighthearted and fun and laugh. And because I think that's such an essential part of it. And I never quite got to it. And I can't remember some of those exercises that are freely offered. So that's kind of one of my shortcomings right now in terms of the joy and the fun, which is the whole point of what we're helping people to achieve. So there we are with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So many of us were taught that therapy was serious business. Very serious business. You had to show up with problems and really take it all seriously. And it's really radical, I think, this idea of it being about joy and joyful aliveness, and that they need that and we need that in our work with our couples. Otherwise, it's pretty grim.
I
Valerie,
love
what
how
are some
everyone's sharing your like personal stories because it really makes us feel more alive. Amy, did you want to share more?
I just wanted Valerie to put some kazoos in her Amazon cart.
I'll do that before the day is out. Thank you.
Good. You can bring him to the next time. I'll come.
Okay. Thank you.
I love that. I love just the reminder of bringing in the joy and the fun and the lightheartedness, and it really helps everybody in the room. I don't know if this is what's coming up for me because I just had a session the other day, and again, I haven't read sentence to this book, but um, I feel like the competence, like talking about the grounding and the structure of the sessions and how helpful they are, I can get through pretty well, right? Like it's like, okay, this is so good. And there's like, I feel like they're getting a quality experience, some insight, understanding themselves and their relationship. But just the other day, and I was noticing I was running over because I had some extra time with a couple, sort of like what's coming up for me from the words I'm looking at in this book is a connection between competence and maybe them detaching from me. Like there was something about the end of the session where it was like there was the now what? Like we did all this stuff. It was good. We had some experience that felt like a quality and whatever. It was worth our time. But then it was difficult. It was sort of I felt like they were just looking at me like, now what? Like they weren't ready to quite leave. I didn't have any gems to give them, just like, bye, like it was sort of like I couldn't tie it up, They weren't in a bad place. Like I've had that happen, where you're like, time to go, and it's not quite wrapped up, but they were in a good place. But they still were kind of like connected to me. And I think some of my old stuff of competence and now what was there. And I noticed that I started to ramble. Like I said, a lot of words. I don't know. It just happened like 2 days ago. And I just was like, what was that?
It makes so much sense to me, Amy, that the competence stuff And as they think about leaving, would then kind of circle back around to attachment almost. I think I think competence and attachment or connecting. So, well, let's call it attachment here. Competence and attachment is so connected. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think when couples first come in, their competence stuff is wide open, but it's also about attachment. Am I going to attach to you as a therapist or to the therapy, to the style, to the way of working? And for us as therapists, am I going to attach to you? Am I good enough? I mean, all those questions. So if I wasn't good enough in the first place to be wanted, how can I ever be good enough? So I mean, it makes sense that as soon as you start to get to this place of competence, oh my God, I got to go out there on my own and do this. And will anybody be there for me? And so it triggers, it sort of circles right around to the beginning again in a way.
Totally. And they were hard to, especially the woman in this, not in ease, she's not a very easily vulnerable or attaching type of person. And I felt like we do have quite a bit of connection and attachment. And that's where I think I felt that they were like, we're not ready to go away from you. Like their competence wasn't able to leave the room,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm,
to go do their work, to go be a couple, a different type of couple. That's what, I was trying to like help them move that little needle a little bit. How could they show up a little bit differently to create a new way of being? But they get it. It's just like they're like, okay.
yeah, I'm thinking of the rapprochement here, how our kids at age, sort of 2 when they're exploring, they go away and they come back, they go away and they come back. Teenagers, I know my kids did this multiple times. They moved out and they came back home. They moved out, they came back home. Drive you crazy until we moved to a house that didn't have an extra bedroom,
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Enough of that. But our clients, they get to this stage of competence and wanting to go off on their own, and then no, I'm scared. Will I be able to manage on my own? So let's hang out, in that place of not quite knowing what to do next. We've done the work, but we're not ready to go, and all of the attachment stuff that comes up underneath all of that is fascinating and challenging, and I think, and yeah, Valerie, you bring your wisdom to this.
Well, I'm going to bring in some of yours because along I can see this, the things that I remember. Like Sophie, I went to a workshop with you at one of the conferences. It was at least 5 years ago. It might have been 6 or 7 or 8. And you were talking about recommending that it's helpful at the end of the session to have a little closing. And the closing you suggested, if I'm remembering this right, and I'm old, so I might not, but I think what you said is, that it's sometimes nice to have a little recap, what went well for you today, what maybe didn't go so well. Is there something you're going to want to focus on next time, or just something? And that would be a structured thing to bring it to a close. So I don't know if that is on the same level that you're talking about, Amy. Just how do we end, and um, hellos and goodbyes are extremely emotional for me. So I can identify with your couple not wanting to leave.
No, close. I mean, yes, because I can nail that opening and then all that, and then how to close it, and also imperfectly, right? These are big questions to ask, and not everybody has the best or was perfect answers. But yeah, the closing wasn't very. It was I wouldn't call it messy. It wasn't tidy.
I think it's so fascinating to look at these things through the developmental lens. What are the needs that are showing up here in those messy moments, in those moments of transition? Um, yeah. Is it the attachment needs that gets activated again as we leave the session or the therapy, the whole therapy? Um,
Yeah, and what kind of closure is right for you as a therapist? What do you like, and what is right for the couple? Like,
hmm.
I took Kalanit's training on homework, and it was so beautiful and really rich. I don't know if you've seen this, but she just did a beautiful job of sort of here are all the different kinds of homework you might use, and here's some strategies on when to use them and how to use them. And I was like, wow, I don't do homework. I really could stretch into this whole framework. I tend to have a very almost intellectual close of like what we learned and given that what our intentions are for the week, kind of more like behavioral um and communication based versus like journaling or other kinds of homework. So I got curious about that in myself, like, oh, wonder why that is. And then also thinking how much I hate homework because in the moment I think, oh yeah, I really want to do that, and then I don't, and then I feel like shit, and then I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna get caught when I go back. And so, it's an interesting thing to think about, like my own experience with homework in school kind of parallels this. So
That word homework, I think for many
yeah.
people, like, "Ooh, I don't
Yeah,
have."
but when I listen to Kalani talk about it and how much it helps the couples move forward between sessions, can be like a transitional object for them. It can scaffold new skills. I was like, wow, this makes so much sense. Like I might have to reconsider my avoidance.
And how homework, the kind of homework and how, if we're thinking developmentally, using that lens, what kind of, how do we present it differently to couples we experience as being challenged at different developmental levels? Would we, if we're doing connecting work, really basic connecting work, what might homework look like there? If we're doing more identity work at that particular period in the therapy, what might the homework look like there, or the competence, and so on. So I think the fascinating thing of thinking developmentally is how do we adapt our centerings to the developmental stuff that might be going on in the therapy, or
Yes.
make up what's going on in the therapy, because it's our story, and the developmental stuff is just stories about relationships, right? It's a nice story. It's a better story than any of the stories I've had before, but they're still just stories, really, aren't they? All these developmental stuff and the exquisite perfection of the fit between partners and so on. It's a great story, but how do we adjust the centering? How do we adjust our sentence stems? How do we adjust our homework? The whole thing according to the work they're doing and in which is about attunement.
Yeah, Sophie, well, first
Um,
and Bonnie, I see you have your hand up, but I just want to really point to like these are the questions we want you to be asking, not answering, but asking, being curious about this couple, your theory, your stories about them, and then how you're going to attune based on the story of where they are developmentally, your centering, your stems, and your closing. But I thought it would be helpful, so if you'd be willing to give an example of like a couple in this stage and how you might adapt it to one of those stages or one of those stories, it might help us think more about how to apply the questions. Would that be something you could
Yeah. Um,
on the spot? So if you go,
on the spot, yeah, challenging right now. I'm not working with a lot of couples anymore. I'm doing mostly teaching. So I've got an individual client
okay.
who's coming to mind, and um, she's really struggling with basic attachment to life stuff, existence, very
Mm-hmm.
abused childhood, but she overfunctioned, became incredibly competent, and then had a sort of manic depressive, has had a manic depressive cycle now, and did some things that have just pitched her into terror of her very existence no longer existing. And, she was sort of, I was working with her using the relational self work that I do. But what I noticed in hindsight was that I did jump out of the structure at some point, and I went into what I was hearing was her wanting to understand. That was the piece I picked up, which is my stuff. I need to understand because there was a hell of a lot, post-war Britain, things weren't talked about in front of the children. Um, don't ask questions. So I got a lot of that. So my need to understand what's going on, my need to understand to make sense of things is huge. So that's where I was going with her. I was trying to help her to understand the links to her childhood stuff, why she, reacted the way she did, and so on. She, not at all what she needed at that time. She's on the level of basic connection, and connecting. And, me just being present and mirroring and holding the space. And so, thinking about how I was out of attunement in that. That was the first example that came to mind just because it's fresh and I'm sitting with it and I think about her at night and, you know,
Oh, yeah. Just like a new baby.
oh dear.
Yeah.
Just like a son who's challenged right now too.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
things
so but I'd like to play around with this if you guys are game.
yeah.
So when you look on page 98, um, Harville and Helen are linking some of this into the four functions. And so when we're talking about sustained connecting, typically it is that birth to 1, 2 years old, which is like, am I worthy of existing? Is there space for me? Will people notice me? And am I going to live through this situation? So in a centering, if I know the couple is sharing sustained connecting as a threadbare stage, because typically they have similar unmet needs, then I might, while their eyes are closed and they've done some breathing, I might weave in this it's okay to exist and be you, the core being sentence here that they highlight. And then I may elaborate on that both of you are important and both of you deserve to exist, and we can create a relationship where there's space for everyone and everyone's like, I might start to plant the seeds for them around these positive messages and frame up a paradigm where two people exist, because in that sustained connecting wound, it's typically only one person gets to exist. And boy, if it's not me, I'm going to die. So I like to do that in my centering. Whereas if it's we're having maybe more of a power struggle on who's, I don't know, who gets to decide where we're going to live next. Again, I might frame it as like, this is such an important decision, and you're both showing up today, really wanting to make the best decision for everybody. And like, framing the session up around their developmental stage. Does that make sense?
It does a lot to me, Michelle. I think one of the things I do when I in my centering is almost some psych ed.
Yes.
I'm weaving the language in, like the connecting stuff. We're creating an environment of safety here. If it's more exploration stuff, a space where we can explore, where we can come back together and share our ideas. And so I'm really kind of giving language in the centering to that.
Yes. And it goes right into the subconscious that way. It's sort of when their eyes are closed and it goes in a different way. Yeah.
A space where I can be myself and where I can allow you to be yourself also, identity stage where, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I love that weaving in the language in the centering. I think adapting the centering to the clients and what they're challenged by in that particular phase of their therapy. Because I don't see it as this is an attachment wounded couple or this is an exploration wounded couple. I think it's more about what they're working on at that time in their therapy.
Yeah, exactly. And then just what you said could become sentence stems,
Absolutely.
right? So if it's what it's like to explore this question with you, where I can be challenged in exploring my strengths in exploring. Like we can then build kind of our focus of the stems along the developmental piece that they're working on. And then also we can think about that in the close, whether we don't have to call it homework. We can call it journaling. We can call it, uh, you know, uh,
Follow
se
up.
self-exploration time or whatever. But whether it's that or it's a close, we can be thinking about how do we move them to being more intentional. Now that I understand more about both of us and our challenges and strengths in exploring, what I would like to do next week is, or my takeaway, so we can be highlighting this developmental work all through the session.
Whilst holding our hypotheses
Lightly.
about, what developmental piece they're working on very lightly.
Mm-hmm.
And does it fit for you? Does this fit for you? Does it
Yeah.
fit for you? Sometimes I will, kind of not the earlier, when I'm experiencing them more as connecting wounded or exploring wounding that they're working on, more the identity and the competence, then I will share with them. This is how I understand, what's going on. Does this fit for you? This is,
Yes.
this is what goes on at identity stage. This is what we need. This is what happens if we don't get that, and this is how we adapt, da 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 da. I'm kind of hearing some of that and what you're sharing today. Does that fit for you? You're on a
Right.
journey of trying to heal from that. So just kind of weaving it in.
Right. So we go back to that phenomenology that we could be projecting. This could be more about us than them. So I really like that you came back to that of like really holding this lightly. Yeah. And it's kind of mirroring the book discussion we started with of like maybe we'll read this book again because even though I mean every stage we all still have pieces in every stage that is worth talking about, I think. Even if we've done a lot of work around one area, it still can be beneficial to re-explore it.
Bonnie.
Well, it looks like we're closing, and I just noticed the last sentence in the chapter.
I thought you were
And I
talking
think,
about me.
oh, yeah, no, Bonnie, it's first time I've been with a fellow Bonnie.
Okay. I've been holding something in.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no,
So,
I saw Bonnie Brinkman was wanting to
right,
share
right.
her wisdom.
What I, I'd like to read is the very last sentence of this chapter. Responding to those challenges, which we've all been talking about, the different developmental stages, by helping couples restore connecting so that the developmental journey of each partner can be restarted, is the intentional of Imago relationship therapy. It's like start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And I like reminding the couples this is the name of the game. It's called start, stop, start, stop.
Yes, the
And
spiral experience.
right,
Yeah.
we'll have longer start. I mean, we'll have longer times where there won't be stops. But it is start, stop because you're on a developmental healing journey. And it's the best game in town.
And circle back. It's not a direct line forward, is it?
And circle
You
back.
circle
Yep.
back, and then you take up another forward and circle
Yep.
back, and yeah.
So it sounds for sure we've heard more from you, Sophie, and you, Michelle, and Bonnie. It sounds like you're somewhat aware of the developmental cycles. So it is a present thing in therapy or when you work with couples, the developmental cycles is something that's, if not front of mind, it's pretty close that you're aware of it in your work. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, Mike, because
Yes.
the sentence stems need to be paired with the developmental stage as close as possible. So, like Sophie said, to ask questions. Does that sound like about right, or does this? Because then the sentence stems will be formed not way below or not way above where they are. If I got you right with regard to what you're asking.
For me, Michael, it's quite present. Sometimes more with some couples than others. With some couples, I feel as though it's just smacking me in the face. You know, this is what they're trying to grow beyond. This is what they're trying to heal from. Um, Other couples, I think about it less, I notice. And I'm curious about why I think about it less with some couples, but I do. It's not as obvious to me in their language, perhaps, and their way of being with each other as it is with some couples. So, but yeah, it's very present for me. And also the social, how the journey of socialization, kind of those areas of functioning, that too is which are the areas that they're emphasizing. Where are my sentence stems? Am I, because I love understanding, do I do much more sort of the reason for sentence stems and what I'm understanding about that is, or do I keep it really balanced between the different areas, the being, the sensing, the doing? I tend to kind of try to think, often I start with the thinking function, you know, what the story I'm telling myself, what's going on in my head, or I may start with my experience of that, the whole being, and then go to head, heart, um, body. So thinking, feeling, sensing, and then a new behavior that I could do, or, you know, I then respond by, so I kind of keep those four areas of functioning in my head as I'm working and crafting my stems to keep myself balanced and keep all those areas of functioning open. So, but yeah, it's very present for me. How about you, Michelle?
Well, I think it's I love what you just shared because it's sort of our behavior change request flow, right? Like it's why the stems are structured that way. But part of what helps me in thinking developmentally is that if a couple can't do something, they don't want to do something, I don't have to worry about that. That's just telling me something about where there's some threadbare development. So, like, I'll have a couple and they'll come in and even just sitting across from each other and looking at each other and doing appreciations is so much intimacy that they're like, oh, I hate this part. I'm like, okay, okay. Like, yeah, do you want to do it then or should we stretch? Like, but knowing that that is because of developmental needs that that they didn't get that kind of sustained connecting. So it's really intense and I don't need to force it. So it just helps me to be more flowy and adjust and lower what sort of my expectations of a session of like maybe we're not going to have these huge ahas or whatever and just that's the work right there is the sustained connecting and maybe they just want to talk about their week, maybe they aren't going to go deeper and that's okay. So one thing I think is really cool is that couples tend to collude on that kind of stuff. So, they might there might be one person wants a little more intimacy, a little more emotional intimacy, but there's a lot of collusion on like, no, like let's not go crazy. I can only tolerate so much of this. So I like that couples or even like communities, right? Like when we're talking about communities, cultures, there's some agreement on what we're going to do and not do as a culture that makes it yeah, a little bit easier to say, okay, that's where we are. That's what we're going to focus on is this is the step we're going to focus on first, which is sustained connecting or safety or structure or full aliveness. And so if somebody doesn't want to do high energy fun at a workshop, I'm like, great. You should not do high energy fun then. You are fine just where you are and how you are. We're able to really not judge them.
Yeah, and I think that's the bottom line of this for me is all of this understanding of the developmental challenges, developmental experiences, the adaptive styles helps me stay out of judgment.
Yeah.
Michelle, I'm
Mostly.
sorry. I'm curious when the clients are not comfortable, you just shift automatically, or are you curious as to the why they don't? Because I'm always curious, opposed to just saying, oh, you're uncomfortable. Because for me, the biggest one is they don't like that meditation where you're silent and just looking at each other. But then when you say things like it's okay to laugh and it's okay to be uncomfortable, they start to like it. So I'm curious, are you curious and kind of push, or do you just say, oh no, you don't want to and step away?
Well, I asked them, I said, so should we do it or not? Like I'm not gonna take their protest as we shouldn't do it. Right. I'm like, should we do it? Should we stretch and do an appreciation today or not? Like, yeah, because I'm like, I don't know how much of a protest this is. Yeah.
I'm always looking for what's the doable stretch just outside their comfort zone.
Yeah.
If they stay in their comfort zone, then they'll stay where they are and they'll always get what they always got and da da da. But if they can stretch just outside their comfort zone, then there's some movement. So that's the kind of place I'm looking for, I think, in terms of what you're asking about. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about just giving up on doing it because they don't want to. It's kind of
Exactly.
finding that little tweak.
Yes.
I think,
And I keep asking.
yeah,
I don't like the next session, I'm still like, okay, turn towards each other and do this. We do the centering and then I have them do appreciation. So it's like I'm not going to stop asking them to do it, but when they protest, I'm also like, oh, we don't need to push because, sometimes when babies are protesting, they need to rest. They don't need that push. That wouldn't be good for them, So, I mean, I'm not saying they're babies, but sometimes the protest is a little bit like that, you
yeah,
know?
I don't want to push them so far that they're going to need their adaptive strategies
Yeah,
reinforced to cope with the situation because it's just too
exactly.
threatening.
Yeah, and I don't know what happened before they came into the session. There, so yeah, I like what you're saying, Latrice, like just the curiosity, and then that's why I think which step was it? I feel like challenging or structure challenge was part of the list of five core needs. Like I do think we need challenges, just like kids need challenges to stretch, as well as support, as well as that unconditional positive regard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another interesting question is what other core needs would we add to those five? Are there some that are missing, like being challenged? Yeah,
Yeah. Is it on there? I can't remember. Not to
don't think
look.
so. No, not in that language anyway.
Not in that language, right? Okay, cool. Well, so we will discuss chapter 5. And of course, Sophie, you're always welcome to come. This was so lovely to have you, and it just makes it even a more interesting and rich conversation. I think we are going to be February 28th. So we're going to get past Valentine's Day because that is our busy season as couples therapists, and I'm going to be on the road. Um, but I'll see you on the 28th and I'll send out an invite, but the same time, 12 Eastern. And I'll put this up on Facebook. And Michael, I wonder if that book that you're referring to is it an older book, the companion guide? I don't
Yeah,
know if it's out there anymore.
the personal companion meditations and exercises for
Okay,
keeping.
that's what it's
I
called.
I
It is out
found it
there.
on Amazon. I found it on Amazon. They sell it used and new.
Yeah, I grabbed one because I'm like, oh, I really want to see
Yeah,
that.
me
That
too.
looks
Yeah,
amazing.
I did too. Yeah.
Yes. And Sophie, you're doing a keeping workshop online. When does that start?
It started,
Okay, it started.
so it's closed now. Yeah, it
Okay.
started yesterday, the day
Okay,
before.
good. And
Mhm.
mine starts on the 24th. It's a Friday night, all day, the 25th and 26th. And I think we have 6 or 7 people registered. So let me know if you have a referral or you want to come.
And
Uh,
mine
Please
starts.
register early for Michelle's sake. We went from 1 to 9 in the last week, if not the last 2 days.
Oh
So
my
we'd
goodness.
almost cancelled. So please register early for any training you do. It's very discombobulating.
I was trying to get a number of couples that we're friends with to all do your workshop, Sophie, but a lot of us are traveling in the next month or so, and so the
Yeah.
timing didn't work out. But I would really like as couples to do the Keeping the Love You Find workshop.
Good.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
come on. We're online, so you can come. Yes, Leslie.
Yeah, so Jennifer and I have a keeping workshop online coming
Oh,
up. It
good.
starts on January 31st and
Great.
it runs for 6 weeks on a Friday afternoon for
Wow.
2.5 hours each.
Oh,
So you
will
get,
you post that on the Facebook group?
okay. Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be,
that's really helpful so we can make referrals.
yeah.
I love that so many people are now doing the keeping workshop. I think it
Yes.
is absolutely brilliant work for both singles and couples, for everybody, especially for Imago therapists. I think it would be a great workshop for all of us to do at least once a year.
Yes. It's
That's
so
my
rich.
favorite workshop, beyond a
Yeah.
shadow of a doubt.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's amazing
Yes.
work.
Yes. Okay, good. Yes, and I'm doing
Yeah.
it in person in Turkey for Valentine's Day. So that'll be fun.
Wow.
Yeah, we have
Michelle,
a translator.
Wow.
where in
Say hi
Turkey?
to Banu, our
Istanbul. I
friend
will.
Banu, and see if Erhan is still around. He was one of my litter mates, and I
Okay.
haven't seen him in many years. But
Okay.
yeah,
I'll
Erhan.
track
I
them
forget his
down.
last name. Thank you, thank
Yes,
you,
it's so
thank
good to
you.
see all of
Have a
your faces.
wonderful time. Thank
This
you
has been
so much,
lovely.
everybody. It's
Thank
been
you.
wonderful.
We'll see you on
Thank
the
you very
Yeah.
much.
28th.
Looking forward to
Bye.
it. Take care,
Bye.
everybody. Bye bye.